Welcome to Whispers to a Bride, where we talk about the stuff no one else is talking about. We are going deep on the emotional aspects of getting married, the stress, drama, and turbulence that affects your own sense of identity and your closest relationships. We are talking about what it means to be a bride and how to navigate this sacred time with more grace and ease. I'm your host, Kara Gassabay. As a life coach and therapist, I'm going to be sharing super practical tips so that you can not only rise to the occasion of your wedding, but also your life.
Hi there, it's Kara, and welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just want to start this episode by really saying thank you. It is so fun to see who listens to this and who it helps. And when you guys reach out in my Instagram DMs and find me on TikTok and give me feedback and ask me questions, it is just the coolest thing. This was such a random idea a couple of years ago. And to feel like it's working and that I'm helping people and that we're connecting is just the coolest thing. So thank you so much for listening. I adore you. And today I wanted to dive into something I'm calling the dress shopping case study. And that's because I just got off of a client call with one of my sort of longer term clients. You can call just for that 1 hour, like, help me solve this problem, help me, figure something out. Or you can sign up with me to be there with you through the whole bridal journey. And I have been with this client through from pretty much her engagement through finding venues and doing all the things and just getting support as different issues have come up. And we had a talk today that, again, I wanted to bring to you guys because it's so many of the conversations with my brides, and it's just hits to the point that I'm always trying to make that sometimes I feel like people don't get, which is that all of the wedding planning tasks and themes and activities, people always think that those are the hard parts, but they're really not the hard part, right? Setting a budget seems like, oh, that's so hard, but it's really no, it's just deciding on the amount of money that is available or appropriate to use in this way. And where's it coming from and where's it going, right? It's simple, not easy, but it's simple. Buying flowers. Okay. Make a choice, place an order. Trying on a dress, find a store, make an appointment, put on dresses, pick the one you like and can afford, purchase it and move on, right? It is all very simple. But yet when you say these things, people are like, oh Lord, because we know that right beneath the surface of what seems like a regular task to complete is actually just so much more, so much interpersonal stuff happening that we don't really talk about. That's really what's causing wedding planning to be so difficult. And so today, the question was just very simple, as they always seem to be, which is, my parents are divorced and my dad remarried when I was 7. So I have a stepmother and a mother, and I'm close to my stepmother and my father. I'm also close to my mother. And so everyone's sort of involved in the wedding planning. And, there's been a few tricky spots on how to navigate all of that because the stepmother really likes to be involved. She's very, very sort of pushy and insistent on being included in things. And my bride is, been accommodating because she's close to her dad and she wants to sort of respect his wife and respect her stepmother. And so she lets her come on some of the vendor visits and be involved in the wedding planning calls when maybe she feels like it's not exactly necessary, but she's like, okay, I can make it work. How we sort of make it work in different relationships in our lives, especially ones that are important to us. And so the thought about the wedding dress shopping has come up. And this bride is so clear that she only wants to shop for a wedding dress with her mother. Seems reasonable. Seems like totally not a strange concept and plan and desire to have. Except that she knows her mother-in-law is going to be so upset and be passive aggressive and use this against her maybe in the future and feel sort of like, how could you leave me out when you know how much it meant to me? And just really wanting to be a part of that moment, which again, you could argue is understandable if this person has been in your life as a stepmother and really wanting to just sort of be there for you and enjoy this moment with you. And yet, my bride is like very, very adamant that she does this with her mom. This is just something that, again, has a lot of meaning. Buying your wedding dress, who is there with you? Who do you trust to bring into that experience? Who did you just imagine being in that experience? And what are you making it mean about yourself, your relationship in this moment? There's something very, now I want to say heavy, but it's more like important and grounded and significant about who is there, which is why I always talk about there is an entire TV show that has been going for like 15 years, watching people have this moment, right? Like, why are we watching people try on wedding dresses? Of course, the fashion's good, but also more intriguing and interesting and gripping is the family dynamics and what goes on between a mother and a daughter. And, sometimes there's an auntie or a friend or a grandmother or a dad or whatever. So we know this is a very loaded moment emotionally. And for this bride to be feeling so, she's so upset at having to tell her stepmother to step back and sort of respect her decision to just do this with her mom. And it's one of those things where we think we're calling just to be like, oh, I have to make this tricky conversation and have this tough conversation, make this call that I know is going to be icky. So I just help me figure out what to say. Easy. Love that. I help brides with this kind of thing all the time. Sometimes we just do need the words and we need a sounding board and we need to sort of role play a little and like talk it through and work it through and get up our courage and our energy and our clarity to be like, what do I need to say that's not too much, but not too little, but in alignment with what I need, but respective of the other person and all of that stuff. Sometimes that's what we need. And then there's the truth of the matter, which is that this little convo she needs to say like, oh, hey, just letting you know, I'm going to be dress shopping in New York with my mom. I know you really have been helping so much at the wedding and I so appreciate it, but I'm going to do this with my mom and then I'll circle back and letting you know what we found, right? Very simple, very clean, very clear cut. But if you know, the reason she's anxious and worried and dreading and procrastinating this conversation is because it's not going to be that simple, because these dynamics of an encroachment and an overstepping and sort of a suffocating is a very, very deep pattern in terms of like a family dynamic that she's been able to sort of roll with since childhood. But something about the wedding moment is making it like, no, like there's something about getting married where you're like, hold on. Now you're looking at the adults in your life, the parents in your life. In this case, you're looking at your dad like, okay, you married this person and now they're being sort of disrespectful or overbearing or difficult to work with. And it's not my problem to deal with. And yet here's the bride. She went to her dad. She asked her dad to sort of have stepmom sort of back off on the dress shopping thing. And he's like, no, you got to do it. So many things to unpack in that dynamic. But it's just, again, more than like the actual logistics of this scenario, it's like the point that what we think is just a simple, like, I'm inviting this person. It just, so many other things come up. And this is that idea of that Pandora's box that I know some people are just so afraid to start to unpack because they just don't know how they'll get it all back in the box. And today was an example of one of those sessions where we're like, oh, let's just like self solve this quick little puzzle of like wordsmithing the phone call to the stepmom to let her know that she's not coming dress shopping. But really, we had to go deeper. And because that was an easy solve, the solve for that is easy. But then we have to go deeper into like, okay, what's the people pleasing part of you that it makes this really, really difficult? Okay, so we can talk about it on that level. And then we got to go a level deeper. Like, what is the dynamic and what is the hurt and what is the pain that goes way back to like the 7-year-old you watching your dad marry this other person, having this new, woman in your life in the role of stepmother and working through all of that and navigating through all of that. And again, nothing's wrong, everything, but as an adult, as a bride, as a woman about to get married and start her own family, everything just like gets very clear and gets very intense. The sort of amount of clarity that you have in this time in your life. I think it's such a gift, but it's also such a burden because, right, you're just like, hey, I want to schedule my dress fitting and like enjoy it. And instead you're like, I'm having to take like a deep dive on the boundaries with my stepmother and also the role in which my father is occupying that makes this harder than maybe it needed to be. And there's just, as you can imagine, in your own life, you've got something like this stuff is painful to talk about and to think about and to like deal with because it's inconvenient timing, right? We're trying to plan a big event and we're trying to get our head straight about our own relationship with our own fiance, not like delve into our parents' divorces and remarriages. And let's also not rethink our own relationship with our stepmother and our mother and our father. But it happens, right? This is part of what I say that there is an identity thing. This is what we're talking about. She is suddenly reevaluating all of her closest relationships because she is in this like life moment that is causing a reorganization of who these people are to her, who they need to be going forward, who they've been to her, right? And there's it's such a one of those milestones that marks adulthood in a different way. I'm not saying you are not an adult until you get married. Absolutely not. It's just one of the ways in which I think we have a mental marker and a societal marker of like, wow, when I become someone's wife, I'm still someone's daughter, but my relationship is different, right? That next of kin, right? If you're in a car accident, they're calling your parents, but now that when you're married, they're calling your spouse. Just that subtle difference is also really profound. And I think it affects us on like multiple layers and levels and makes us just like look around and see things that maybe we've always known, but they didn't bother us in the same way. But now it's like a reckoning. I've talked about this before on the podcast. It's like your wedding forces these issues sort of up to the surface, right? This dress shopping outing is forcing the issue of this bride having to put up a boundary with an overreaching stepmother, right? Sort of a bit of more of a bulldozery personality who doesn't kind of know how to position herself in this dynamic of a stepmom in a, wedding planning role. And also to preserve her relationship with her mom and to honor that relationship and to honor that desire that she has, that her mom has, to honor what she imagined and what she still wants. This isn't a case of where like, oh, when I was 7 years old, I thought I'd go shopping with mom, but now I have these two wonderful mother figures and I want them both there. If that were the case, she could do that and she would. But she's feeling like forced to have this woman in because this woman's shoving her way in. And she's like, God, I have to put up this boundary because the cool thing about this client and so many of my clients is that like, as much as there's this like nice girl energy and this people pleasing and there's this peacekeeping, there's also like these strong, like in stone, just this is the line. I will not let her have this. Like I'll let her pick the flowers for this. I'll let her come on a site visit for that. I'll let her be on a phone call for this, but like she cannot be in the wedding dress shop. And like, I love that kind of clarity. I love when people can just speak at you. And even when she says it, she's like, I know it sounds mean and hard, and it doesn't. It sounds clear and it sounds clean. And it sounds like doing this is standing for yourself as an adult daughter, stepdaughter, in a way that as a child we weren't able to do, right? When you're a kid, you're dependent on your caregivers for your survival. And with that, you make accommodations and decisions and allowances, and you create the relationship based on your survival. Some of us stay in that pattern for a very long time. But there's something about getting married that makes you feel a little bit sturdier and stronger and clearer in realizing that you don't have to stay in the same childhood patterns. You're allowed to rework this relationship from your now adult self and set your own boundaries and figure out what you need and want from these other adults in your life. Again, they're not exactly your peers, but they are not your life source and your guardians and your protectors and it's just not the same dependency. And that's just an important thing. Again, it's uncomfortable for everyone, but it's just a real thing that is so important to just kind of note that is why these sort of rituals like weddings and stuff, they make us kind of go through these icky things that seem logistics based, but they're really having us confront these family dynamics and old patterns of operating that need to be updated and upgraded to then continue in the future. And we talked about how doing this icky, what feels icky, which is just completely normal and reasonable and not a big deal. But again, in this dynamic, in this scenario, it feels very intense and very icky. But by her doing this and standing for herself and sticking with her guns and speaking her truth lovingly, with care and compassion, but sticking to her boundary, not only is super healing for the child version of her who could not do that, who just didn't have the words, didn't have the permission, didn't have the authority, didn't have the power, didn't have the voice, but it's also speaking for the future self. Because we talked about how, like, when you constantly people please and you let people cross boundaries and you let people walk all over you, you can do it, you could do it, you could do it, you could do it. But then there's a time in like your 40s, it's different for everyone, but I do notice being in my 40s now that I feel the way that this resonates, where you're just like, you lose the ability to let yourself be walked on in that way. And you'll start cutting people off, right? Like you'll get so, right? You can give so much at one point, it just breaks. And that I think is, not only is it unfair to yourself, but also to the other person. So the most loving thing you can do is start to stand in your truth sooner than later. It will help create a new pattern going forward so that hopefully the boundaries will be better understood, articulated, and respected with mother-in-law and bride as they're going into the future. And there are more complicated family gatherings and obligations and all those things. But also it will contain her life force so that she won't be signing up for more years of just this silent leaking of her energy and her integrity by allowing this person to dictate and overrule and sort of just walk all over her in this relationship, in this dynamic. So again, it's the most loving thing she can do is to step up and tell the truth now, even though on its surface, it might feel like, shouldn't we just kind of let her come just to kind of keep the peace? Like mom will understand, she gets it. And I don't want to cause any drama, right? There's ways in which that does seem like the path of least resistance. And this is why it can be really helpful to talk through with someone, because sometimes it is this scenario, right? We talked about even with the same stepmom-daughter relationship, there were other ways in which it made sense and she felt good about letting her into things like, she doesn't really need to be there, but like, I don't mind doing it. I can be generous in that way. I can be open and let her in and whatever. But when you feel so strongly about a scenario as she does about this dress shopping, that is when you have got to listen to yourself, because that is just such a bigger thing than the dress. It is your past. It is your future. It is your now self, knowing who you are now, speaking for like all of you. It's such, I'm just like, I was just, like so emotionally like ramped up for this client because I just feel the ways in which this is a huge shift. It is a small thing. It's a small phone call, but it's a huge shift in that relationship dynamic. And it can be really scary to make. And it can be really inconvenient timing because nobody wants anybody mad at them or on their wedding and all that stuff. But this is what this time calls for. It's what it's asking for. And so I hope just sort of walking you through that little case study just shows like, yeah, let's go dress shopping. It seems so easy. And it's not, because there's all these other dynamics at play. And so if you are finding yourself like, I feel like I have an easy problem, but it's hard, but it shouldn't be, right? There's all these other things underneath of it. And that is what I help people with. That is what is normal that everybody's going through, but they don't often talk about it. And they keep things at that surface level when all this deeper stuff is happening. So I hope this little example is useful to you. If you're going through something similar, reach out, tell me about it. My Instagram is always open. DMs are your space to tell me what is up. Book a call. We can talk through and decide, is this one of those things where you just kind of let it slide? Or is this where you have to hold your ground and stay true to yourself? And knowing that and navigating that is one of like the best muscles to build. And like you'll just, that self-trust that you'll have, the more you do that, your life just gets easier from there. So yeah, thank you so much again for listening. I love you guys so much. And I am wishing you nothing but bridal bliss.